What up, y'all? This is your Don Israel coming to you live from Lit, asking y'all to subscribe to the channel. So make sure y'all subscribe, make sure y'all liking the videos, make sure y'all commenting, and make sure you turn on your notifications that let you know when new videos are dropping. We're dropping them daily, and you want to be on it because we on it, all right? So keep it lit, keep it locked, subscribe, we out. Marduce is a drink. What's going on, y'all? This is your boy, Don Israel, back again with another episode of Lit, the premier platform for all things literary, swaggy, and otherwise. Today's guest is a special guest. I don't think who needs any introduction, but for those who are uninitiated, I'm here with the novelist and writer, Jesmyn Ward, who pulled up today in a pair of trusty boots. And we're going to be here talking about Sing Unburied Sing, growing up in the South, and how she translates that into her writing. And we're just going to talk some shit because that's what this show is about. So thank you, Jesmyn, for pulling up.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I'm glad to see you. And we got to all see this swaggy fit that you pulled up in. So we got a swag cam. So you stand up.
I need to stand up.
Yeah, and then walk us through the fit. Walk us through the fit.
This is all free people.
Okay.
Yes. So I guess sometimes it's like their own brand. They make their own things. So they made the dress. And also
let's talk about these trusty boots. You know, when I look at these boots now, I am thinking about one thing only. I'm thinking about the New Edition movie with Johnny Gill. Like, that's all I can think about. So give us the boots. Talk about the boots.
So I saw these boots on Free People, like on the website, and I was like, oh, I want them so bad. I have to have them. But they were expensive. So I was like, okay, I can't get them. Maybe I just need to think about this.
Okay.
And so I just sat on it for a long time. And then, like, I don't know, 2 months down the line, after they debuted them online, they went on sale. So I was like, oh, I have to get them.
You got to snag those.
Yeah, because, they're black and white. Look at that. They have a little, looks like little wings on the side. I was
that's fly.
I can wear these with anything.
Definition of fly.
So I had to get them, and I wear them everywhere.
That's a good look. It's a good look. So thank you for walking us through the fit, curating the fit for us. So I don't know if you've seen any episodes, but this is basically the cocktail of Lit. It's called the Marduce. Okay. It's 3 parts Martinelli's. Okay. 1 part Douce. Okay. All parts delicious. Okay. All right. So I think about taglines all the time. So what you gonna do? You're gonna open your Martinelli's. You're gonna drink to the leaves. Okay. And then we're gonna pour you up. Okay. I know you got a whole day, so you tell me how much you wanna. Okay. All right. So,
yeah, that's good. Okay.
Cool. So thank you. Thank you. Congrats on publishing day. Okay, cool. Now you tell me when to stop. Okay.
That's good.
That's good? Cool.
Yeah. I ate a big breakfast, so I think I should be all right.
All right, we got to stretch this for as many episodes as we can because we ain't got no funding. So Nicole Sealy came on. She was like, Don, you being stingy with this Douce. I'm like, this is $65 a bottle. I cannot afford to break this up. So you're going to swirl it. Yeah, you're going to swirl it. Okay. Then you're going to get another toast. Boom.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. This is the drink. This is the gin and juice.
I've never had that before.
Nah, it just came out.
Okay.
We just made it. So you got to talk, chop it up. 1, we got to start. Why are you so brilliant?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Let's go
to answer.
Yeah, it is. How would you answer that question? Do you see yourself as brilliant?
No.
Why not?
Because I think that when I am sitting in front of my computer and when I'm working on my rough drafts or revising, which I do a lot of revising. Right. I don't know. It's I guess I'm aware of the work that goes into it. Yeah. So it doesn't. I don't know. Like, I just think about all the time and the work and the fact that like I depend on a big group of first readers, right? Okay. Like my friends who are writers, to look at my work and to give me feedback. And I also depend pretty heavily on my editor and Scribner, to give me feedback. Yes, I shout out Kathy, who I love and who I think, and I've said this before, but I think she makes me a better writer. So I don't think of myself as brilliant. Maybe I think of myself as a hard worker. Okay. But I don't
So brilliant to you is it has to be a sense of effortlessness.
Yes, and I don't. It doesn't feel like that to me. You know
right.
what I'm saying? Like, because I look at it and I see all the work that I put into it.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, so this new book, Sing Unburied Sing, which drops today. The episode gonna drop tomorrow.
Okay.
Which is today for y'all watching and listening. But I think the narrative opens with JoJo and the scene of him and his grandfather killing the goat, right? And I read that and I was like, damn, I'm not built for life. From the city, if I felt like I had to kill my own chicken, I think I'd be eating I'd be a vegan just by lack of heart. And when you talk about this hard work, would you say that your sort of Southern country upbringing instilled that in you, or was this more of a backdrop?
I think so. Because I have I have a fairly large extended family. Okay. And so I feel like I grew up hearing stories from my grandmother, my father,
paternal or maternal.
I'm sorry, my maternal grandmother, my mom, and my dad. Right. And then multiple people, multiple aunts and uncles in my maternal, from my mom's family, and then also from my maternal great-grandfather. Okay. Just hearing stories about, what it was like for them, living, on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Yeah. And just trying to make it. I come to DeLille, really small town, and so for
name of the town.
Oh, DeLille. Okay. And so for
what's the population? When you say it's like a small town,
maybe 1,000 if we're lucky. Yeah, it's really small.
I think everybody's Social Security at that. Close,
yeah, so I don't know. I just grew up hearing stories from them about how, my grandmother told me stories about, that my great grandfather would just plant. He'd have, because that's how they ate, right? Yeah. And so he, would plant corn and plant rows and rows and rows of beans and tomatoes and greens, and he would plant year round. Yeah. And then so the kids, their job was to get out there, and they had to weed and they had to, pick, and they had to help him plant. And so I don't know, I guess I just grew up with stories, that people in my mom's family told that I think that made me appreciate this sort of a legacy of hard work. Right. And I think that hearing those stories, I think that informs the way that I think about writing. Going to the MFA program definitely helped me to develop a sense of discipline. Yeah. But I think one of the reasons that it was easier for me to develop that sense of discipline when I was in the MFA program is because I grew up with these stories about, the people in my family told me about working hard. And I think because I come from such a poor background, Yeah,
I know. I read part of the memoir. You said you grew up in Section 8. Yeah, that's right, girl.
I did.
I'm with you. We were changing homes.
Yeah, exactly.
Clothes. So
my mom worked for years as a domestic. My grandmother had several different jobs. She's worked as a domestic, as a a hairdresser, as a seamstress. She worked as an attendant, in a nursing home, right? Yeah. So my grandmother she worked in a bottling factory. Right. My grandmother has had multiple jobs. My dad has always done factory work. So I think that, that when I got
surrounded by this ethic.
Exactly. And then when I got the opportunity to go to the MFA program,
and where'd you go?
I went to University of Michigan at Ann Arbor.
Damn, how'd you? What?
So it just made me look at writing as, first of all, here I had this amazing opportunity that people from my socioeconomic bracket don't get. Right. It didn't feel like it didn't seem like it was a common thing.
Oh, it wasn't. No, you ain't convincing me. Listen. Yeah, we from the same.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I have this opportunity. I need to work my ass off. And so that's what I did. But the reason I went to Michigan is because when I went to Stanford for my undergraduate education. And while I was there, I did a one-on-one tutorial with a Segner fellow. The Segner fellow that I worked with is, her name is, she goes by Quanberry these days, but her name is full name was Amy Quamberry. I knew her as Amy back then.
Right.
And she'd attended Michigan to get her poetry MFA degree. And I was asking her advice on places that I could apply to, for school. And I was applying to all places in the South, right? Because I wanted to go back to the South. And she was like, have you thought about Michigan? They have a really great program. Yeah. And she persuaded me to apply. And then they were one of the first schools that got back to me and gave me really good financial aid.
That's always going to be, that's
so
always going to be the thing.
Guess I'm heading north.
I'm where the money at. So let me go back. Mm-hmm. Paint the picture. What does the crucible of Jesmyn Ward? I refer to people that sit next to me in third person a lot. It's weird. But what does your crucible look like growing up? Like I feel like what this book captures is a certain intimacy of family, the closeness of it, even when there's a distance. Mm-hmm. What does your family look like growing up?
My parents, they weren't married when they had me. Okay. Right. I was born in California, and then when I was around 3, and my mom was pregnant with my little brother, they decided that they wanted to move back home to Mississippi. Okay. Right, because we were living. They were living out in Oakland and Berkeley, and so they decided to move home. And so once I moved home, I was around. Then my parents got married when I moved home, and my parents, had 2 more kids. Okay. Right. Both girls, right? So I have 1 brother and I have 2 sisters in my immediate, family. But then when we moved home, then I was around my mother's entire extended family, and there are over 200 of us. That's how large. So y'all account for family is
close to a fourth of the town of DeLille.
Yes, everybody's a Dito. Everybody's related to the Ditos. Okay. And so that's my mother's family's last name. Okay. And then even my dad's family, a lot of them live in Pasquishan. And so, and some of them also live in DeLille too. Yeah. And so I was just, around a huge, amount of people who, who I was related.
No, yeah.
To, shared in the raising.
Yeah. And that's, that to me is I think being a Black person from the north, from the city, it's just that can't, I'm being unable to fathom what that's like to know everybody in a very real way, which is very different than up here where a lot of my family is invented. That's my cousin by circle. We went to free lunch together for a number of years. Yeah. That's my man. That's my cousin. He's who related? None of your business. You related by lack of bread. So, you come from a strong sense of or at least a deep sense of family and roots and things like that. And you talk about these stories. Mm-hmm. Do you remember, could you speak to one of the first stories you remember that was told to you that resonated?
It had to be there are two different, can I tell 2 different stories?
You could tell how many stories you want. Within a lot. But you can talk. Yeah.
So first, I remember my dad telling me a story when I was younger. So my dad grew up before Hurricane Katrina hit in 1969. My dad...
Hurricane Katrina? It was 2?
I'm sorry. Hurricane Camille.
Okay.
Hit in 1969. My dad grew up in Pasquishan. And
that's another town.
Yes, and that's the town that's to the south of DeLille, which is my hometown. And it's Pasquishan is directly on the Gulf of Mexico. Okay. And so that's where my dad grew up most of the time. And he told me this story about the public park, right? And so it's this really nice public park. It's called Memorial Park. It has these defunct, non-functioning cannons in it, I guess, from the Civil War. Okay. Maybe is Civil War? It might be, or is it one of the World? I don't know. I think they were from the Civil War.
It was from a war.
It's from a war, and so they're pointing out towards the Gulf. Okay. I guess to defend the coastline. Anyhow, when my dad was little, that was the public park, and so my dad's little, in the through the early, middle 60s, right? And he always told me, he was when I was a little boy, we weren't allowed to play in the park. And that was, I think the reason that this story sticks with me is because, when I was little, my dad, he would take me and my siblings to that park all the time. We would go there and play and climb up on the cannons and play on the swings. But my dad said, when I was little, we weren't allowed to play in the park. He said, so me and my cousins, we used to like run around the paths, and we would go into the park and we would start to play. And then there was a person, like a
park
groundskeeper, who lived in a little house that was on the park. And so that it was a woman too. And he said whenever she would see us playing in the park, she'd come out, she'd scream at us, "Oh, get out of here, you little niggers." That's what she would say.
Oh shit.
And so that, and she would threaten them, and then so they would run away he said we would run away laughing, but they'd have to run out of the park because back then, segregation, right? Yeah. And so black people weren't allowed in public, like they weren't allowed to use, public, spaces like that. They weren't allowed in the park. They weren't allowed on the beach, which is right across the street from the park. And so that stuck with me, I guess, because it was, here's this evidence that, because we're black, because my father was black, you know what I'm saying? That at one time, when my dad was little, like they were treated differently. Right. So that story stuck with me. Like I said, my dad told me that story, I don't know, maybe when I was 8, 9. Okay. And then my grandmother told me a story, and this story sticks with me too, where, this is my maternal grandmother. So my grandmother's father was half white, right? Okay. And when she was young, and this is when they had, like, I guess this was in the 40s, right? So when she was young, they would drive out of DeLille, and they had one of those old cars where they used to call the trunk the boot of the car. Okay. Right? And they would drive, I guess it's like north of DeLille. They drive north and they drive to the kiln. Okay. And that's where my grandfather's like white family lived. Oh. Yeah. And so they would drive up there to go visit like his white family. And so it would be, my great grandfather, his mom who was white, and then, my grandmother and like her sisters and brothers. And she said that they would go up there during the daytime to go visit him. And then when the sun would start going down, that then, his sort of white family, right, his aunt, my great-grandfather's aunt would say, "I think it's time for y'all to go." And what was unsaid was like, y'all need to go because you're not safe up here. Once the sun sets, right? Once it's dark. And so they would get in the car, and my great-grandfather would ride in the front, and then, and he would drive, and then his mom, who's white, would be sitting next to him. He was super light-skinned, but then the kids who were all colors of the, of the spectrum, like some of them were dark-skinned, some of them were light-skinned, but you could tell that they were black, of African descent. They would have to hide in the trunk. So they would put the kids, they would have to hide, crouch down in the boot of the car, so that when they were coming through the kiln, that like no one saw that there were black people there.
And that's grandmother.
That's
and you know what's poignant about these stories. I don't know, is how close and like they are to our experiences, right? And I think that like the assumption of the history of slavery, of segregation, of Jim Crow is that, that happened in the past. Yeah. But not thinking about the lives that occupy that space and time. Yeah. And how those stories stay with people and those are real experiences. So like when I really put it in context, like my mother was born 1958. Her mother was born 1938. No, 18 years. I'm not good at math. 1952 something, something like that. She was born. They both, but the thing that I was seeing when you really look at the years is like you were not that many years removed. One from slavery, but then it's like the experiences that occupy those in between times, right? Because we kind of go like Civil War, Reconstruction. You like jump all the way to civil rights, and then like today, as opposed to what did the lives look like occupying the spaces in between. And this book does a really wonderful job of using those stories to work as a sort of glue that pastes these like disparate times together of like there's things that happen in between them and they keep these things together. For you now, talking about the writer in you, we got the storytelling foundation. What writing was the first writing that that did that for you?
Okay, this is.
Come on, you
might think this is a silly answer because it's not a serious book, but
come on, why? But there's no such thing as an unserious. If it's in the book, and if you take it serious, it's serious.
Yeah, that's true.
So who was it?
It's a children's book. It's Robin McKinley's The Hero and the Crown.
Okay, what is it? I've never put me on.
I don't have my Kindle. I forgot to grab it. I read this book for the first time, I think, when I was 8 years old.
Okay.
And
Jesmyn Ward got a Kindle.
I do. I have a Kindle. They're easy for travel. You know, you can have like 200 books with you. And you don't have to put them in your suitcase in your bag.
You hear that, Kindle? Cut Jesmyn Ward a check. She just gave y'all free press.
Yeah, for me it was The Hero and the Crown, and I think that part of the reason that book, I think that when I read that book for the first time, that there's something about that main character, right? Who's this, you know, I think she's a teenager at the opening of the book.
Right. And
she is a princess, but her mom died in childbirth, right? When she had her, and she's the only child of the king. And because her mother was a foreigner, right? So she's the princess of the kingdom of the South, and her mother was from the North. And because her mother was from the North and her mother wasn't a Southerner, she's sort of been ostracized her entire life and neglected a bit by her dad. And, you know, people in the kingdom, like the inference is that she's not, you know, because her mother was a foreigner, that she's not fit to rule, that she doesn't belong. She looks like her looks, so she looks different from everyone else. And so she's felt very isolated, I think, her entire life. And that is clear from the beginning of the book, from the very first paragraphs. Yeah. And I think there's something about, it was the first time that I encountered a character like that, right? Where it seemed like she just seemed so vivid and so real to me from the very beginning lines of the first paragraph. Right. And you know, and she wasn't just some, you know, sort of plucky, you know, uncomplicated girl like most of the heroines in my reading, you know, that I'd encountered before. Right. You know, like here was this, you know, young woman whose life was really complicated, you know, and who maybe did not have the best family life and was sort of struggling to, I don't know, understand who she was and understand her place, you know, in that. Yeah, in that. Yeah. And something about that struck me. And so I think that was the first time that I was really in awe, that I was conscious of the fact that a writer was able in some ways to do magic, you know, by like creating this person that felt so real to me, even though I was 8 and I didn't understand half of what was happening in the book.
But the feeling was real.
Yeah, but the feeling was real.
So that's why I'm saying you can't do that. Like we always got to think, because what's funny is like I think the in relation to the writer who's on here, and I guess the more literary they are, the more they're afraid to admit who was their portal of entry. But it's like, come on, I think it's very unsatisfying if like, you know, everyone's portal of entry is like, oh yeah, I remember reading Faulkner, drinking my scotch on the sides of the house, and it's like, yeah, I mean, because most people's entrance is not that, like Cat in the Hats, if that's what got you in, but it's this is dope. Yeah. This is dope. And so, and you're 8 years old here. When do you take your first stab at writing?
When I was 12. So 4 years later.
Okay.
And I wrote a poem for Arbor Day.
What's Arbor Day?
Arbor Day is something that a holiday we were celebrating at my elementary school where we planted trees. Okay. I guess. And so it was about, I can't remember.
Tree poem?
It was a tree poem.
I
know the wind.
Grow with me.
Yeah, the wind figured prominently in the poem, and the wind was whispering, and but that was my first stab.
All right. And then when did you? So this book finds you at 8. You find a pen at 12. When does it sort of settle for you that you're a writer?
Probably 14.
Damn.
2 years later.
Young.
But I didn't have the confidence to actually pursue it at that age.
Okay.
I mean, I did. I was writing in bad poetry and around age.
What's your
16.
definition of bad poetry?
See, bad poetry. My definition of bad poetry is poetry that, like, I'm too long-winded, I feel like, when it comes to when I'm attempting to write poetry. And that's, you know, I mean, that's like, that's what makes poetry problematic for me. I feel like I'm not good at being succinct enough.
Okay.
And because, so my first short story that was published in a public space, and it's about a truck driver, right?
Yeah.
And I was very proud of that story. And then I read a poem that Louise Erdrich wrote called, I think it's called Walking in the Breakdown Lane. And in 12 lines, she accomplished, you know, like she did what, you know, like it took me an entire short story, 18 pages to do. And she did it, you know, in a poem and sort of made me, as I'm reading this poem, like I'm feeling, you know, this like welling up of emotion and sympathy, you know, for this person walking on the side of the road, and she just did it. So, you know, I can't do that yet. I would love to, right? Because I so admire writers who write across genres. Like I would love to write a children's book one day, and maybe when I'm very old, maybe I don't know, like if I live to be 60, I would love to publish a book of poetry. I you know, maybe in 20 years, you know, like it will. I will. You would have said everything you needed to say enough to be like, I don't need to say this. Yeah. And I can actually write a good poem for once. Okay. But I would love to.
No, the reason why I asked about the poetry question is because I feel like a lot of times we talk about, I think what it is, like if it's bad or good, but we don't address like the first definition of like what we think poetry is. Because I think depending on our understandings of fiction or nonfiction, that creates the sort of hierarchy of how we think about what's good writing, what's bad writing. So I just wanted to get your sense of poetry, to get your sense of bad poetry. But you write this poem about a tree. Yes. And it evolves. Did you realize in writing about that tree that you had too much to say about a tree and that maybe you should do something else, or was it?
I think that, let's see, when I wrote that poem about the tree, it's not that I had so much to say exactly about the tree. I think that I realized that I wanted to tell longer stories. You know, I was a little, I mean, I was reading everything that I could get my hands on, right? And just like wandering through the library, my school libraries mostly, sometimes the public library, but most of my school libraries, and just picking things up, right? Yeah. And back when I was in, you know, got a lot of inside jokes. High school, I read a lot of fantasy, you know, in sci-fi.
Why do you feel like the fantasy. Judge, like the eye of literary culture is judging you?
Yeah, sometimes, you know, I mean, I don't know. And I think the reason that I feel that way is because, you know, I've run across, you know, several writers, you know, my education as a writer.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've all been,
Yeah, when they, you know, exactly.
Zane, you read Sister Soldier.
Exactly.
Who is that? It's a rapper? Like, that's a book. Like,
exactly.
Right.
You know, so I don't know. I was a, you know, fantasy nerd, and I wanted to write, you know, some like fantasy. I figured out that there were short stories set in fantasy worlds that I wanted to write. So I think that's why I began to write short stories when I was like 14.
But but when you think about what fantasy allows for, right? And I think that that's what's insidious about, like, in addition to the thing about people can't enjoy it, but it's also who's allowed to even exist in it. Yes. Right? Yes. And the lack of fantasy. Like, you think about the way novels, like when people of color, black women, black men, you know, trans, whoever writes a book about, like, or ever attempts fiction, it has to be fact. Yeah. Right? Oh, no, this is about you. Right? Yep. As opposed to, like, that ability, like, why can't this be an imagined thing?
Yeah.
And it's like you have to sort of stay true to the factors of your lives, as opposed to like being able to imagine an other world.
Yeah, exactly.
And so for you, how did you like, because this book, for me, I guess the basis I've been learning of fiction is that it has to, like all fiction has a fact as a foundation. And then it operates from that foundation into something else. But the basis fact has to remain like true. Something true about it has to exist for it to even be a believable story at all. Yeah. So what was, for this book, the foundational fact that you based this book on? Is that a clear question?
It is a clear question.
Okay, I just want to make sure, Abby.
I just need a second to think about the answer. I think the foundational fact or facts for this book are that little kids like JoJo and Richie exist, or existed. One of the things that like brought me to this, or the question that brought me to this story, was I asked myself, what would it be like for a mixed race boy like growing up in the modern South, right? What would that experience be like for him, especially when so much of his personal identity is informed by these larger, by the legacy of slavery, and racism and racial violence. Like what is that like for him? And then I was researching Parchment Prison Farm because I knew nothing about it. I was reading.
And that's an actual prison? Yes,
it's an actual prison in Mississippi. It's a Mississippi State Prison. Okay. And so I was reading this book called Worse Than Slavery by David Oshinsky. Okay. Which I found actually when I visited Esselwan Books in LA. Right, so the oldest Black bookstore. And so I was visiting Esselwan. I found this book, picked it up, started reading it. And I read that, in the 40s, that young Black boys who were 12 and 13 years old were actually charged with like small petty crimes like loitering, sometimes for like stealing very small things, and then were sent to Parchment Prison. And Parchment Prison, at least back then, was a horrible place to be. I mean, it was basically, the title of the book that I was using to research is called Worse Than Slavery. In some ways it was, worse than slavery. I mean, when you were sent there, it basically meant that you were relegated to being a slave again, because you were sent there and then you worked and you were tortured and you were whipped with Black Betty, the whip. And you were, there were guards that were actually other inmates, but that guards called trusty shooters, like worked as like drivers, that were given rifles and who would like stand at the edge of the fields, make sure that nobody tried to run. And if you tried to run and they caught you and they shot you and they killed you, then they were set free, like as a reward. Shit. And so when I read, I mean, that's how brutal this this prison was. Base someone's freedom off someone else's demise. Yes. Like that's fucked. Yes. And so and then in the early days of the prison, the people that ran the prison would actually rent out the inmates to like different, industrial barons in the region to clear land or to, whatever work, that these barons want, these white, barons wanted them to do. They would rent the inmates out to them. So once I read that there were actual 12 and 13-year-old boys who were sent to this place and lived and died there, I was like, this character has to exist in this book. This character has to be present in the, in the moment. This character has to interact with JoJo, and so I think those were the two sort of like nuggets of truth. Yeah. When I was reading those scenes, it reminded me of Life, Eddie Murphy's Life, which is like, I feel like that's miscategorized as a comedy. Yeah. That shit is a horror film. It is. Like when you think about the basic plot that these two men are in jail for the whole of their lives on a crime they didn't commit. Yeah. And those scenes where like
like that the whole idea of like the way the power relations work.
Yep.
Of like the old the older black guy who was like the trusty shooter, and I was just thinking about those things and like what he was able to like uncover, like show with comedy.
Yeah.
In a sense. Like it was just like it gave me a way into like the book in a way to visualize it. Yeah. Speaking of like, like the visuals of this, paint the picture of like what the actual story looks like. So if you could like just give people a sense of like, we know JoJo is the son and his mother's Leonie and Michael is the father.
Yeah.
And we have Pops and Ma. That's Leonie's
parents
who are black.
Yes.
And then Big, what's his name?
Joseph.
Big Joseph and the mother.
I don't think she's named. I don't think I named her.
Okay. Nah, yeah, I don't think she was either.
Yeah.
But you have this sort of, it's like this mirroring of like what you described as the kiln. And what was that, like, why set it that, like, what was the choice to set it that way?
So I started working on a version of Seeing Unburied Scene way back in like 2009.
Okay.
And because I had the character, I had JoJo's character, he was stuck in my head. Yeah. And there was something about
this was after reading the book? Or this was before reading the book?
No, this was before reading the book.
Okay.
I already wanted to write a story about this 13-year-old kid.
Yeah. Mixed
race kid growing up in the Modern South. And so I had his character in my head. Except when I was working on those like first early rough drafts of the first chapter, he was in a completely different situation. Like he was, Katrina had happened and he was like wandering around this apocalyptic landscape, right? Of immediate post Katrina, right? And in those like early chapters, his mom was white. He had like 2 siblings, I think. Okay. 2 or 3 siblings. But they were absent from the very beginning because they had been swept away by the water. Oh. And he in those bad first chapters, he met an old man, and I think that the old man was like a stand-in for Pop. Right. And this old man, just wasn't related to JoJo at all. And as I said, they were bad and they were unsuccessful. I kept writing them and throwing them away because something about it didn't work. Yeah. And I think the reason that they didn't work is because I didn't know enough about the people who surround him, right? And because I basically got rid of his family, in those first chapters because I didn't know who they were. Right. So it's easy to just write them out of the narrative. Right. And that wasn't working. Yeah. Because I realized now that so much of what is important about JoJo and about how he understands himself and how he sees himself in the world, like so much of that depends on who his family, like his family, right? And so in order to come, to this first chapter and like begin a good, a first draft that would stick, I had to figure out who the people around him were, like who his family, what, the members of his family were. And so, and early on, I realized, okay, it's not working that Leonie is white. I don't know why, but it just wasn't working. And so, but once I switched things around and Leonie's black and his dad, Michael, is white, then everything, it seemed right for some reason, and it worked. So, Leonie, his mom is black. His dad is white. His dad is in jail in Parchment Prison, right? Yeah. Leonie she's absent. I mean, she's struggling with addiction. Yeah. She's also just naturally a very selfish person, I think. She's also struggling to deal with the grief that she feels from losing her brother when she was a teenager, right? So her brother was killed in a hunting accident when she was a teenager, and she's just she hasn't dealt with that yet, I think. And so she's, sort of walking around with that wound that is unhealed. And I think that also complicates her and makes it harder for her to see past her own pain to take care of a kid. So she's not the best mom. So because she's not the best mom, her parents, Ma'am and Pop, right, take care of her kids. They take care of Michaela, who's 2, and JoJo. I think she's 2 or 3, and JoJo, who's turning 13 on the first day of the book.
So, one of the things I will say, and before I have you read something from the book, is that although you recognize in the writing, and anyone reading will recognize that Leonie's a bad mother, you write her with a forgiveness and an empathy that doesn't immediately write her away. Yeah. Right? Like, even though she's an absent mother, that doesn't mean that she's not there. Yeah. In the way she tries to be there. Yeah. And to me, it's a nuance of how, mothers are written. Because often it's like when a mother fails, and that threshold for failure is very, very low. Yeah. But it takes very little for a mother to fail. But yet you write this sort of, like, what's heartbreaking about her is that she doesn't want to fail. Yeah. And that she tries her best with what she's given. Yeah. No pun intended. To not fail at being a mother, but like she just can't help but to fail. Which is not to say that she has no choice, but it's like, given what she's dealing with, it's really hard for that to it's really hard for her to be the best mother she can be. So read some of, like, you talk about, the death of her brother haunting her. Can you read that section, please? No problem.
So the section I'm about to read, Leonie is telling the story, and she's, she's basically telling the story of her brother's life and his death. Given played football with single-minded purpose his senior year, the fall before he died. Recruiters from local community and state colleges came every weekend to see his games. He was tall and well-muscled, and his feet didn't touch the ground once he got the pigskin in his hand. Even though he was serious about football, he was still social when he wasn't at practice or on the field. Once he told Pop his teammates, white and black, were like brothers to him, that it was like the team went to war every Friday night, came together and became something more, something greater than themselves. Pop looked down at his shoes and spat a brown stream in the dirt. Given said he was going up to the kill to party with his white teammates, and Pop cautioned him against it. They look at you and see different, son. Don't matter what you see, it's about what they do, Pop had said, and then spit the whole mess of chew out. Given it rolled his eyes, leaned into the hood of the 77 Nova they were fixing up for him to drive, and said, "All right, Pop." Looked up at me and winked. I was just grateful Pop hadn't sent me inside, glad I could hand them tools and fetch them water and watch them work, because I didn't want to go in the house just in case Mama decided to give me one of her plant lessons. Herbs and medicine, she told me when I turned 7. I can teach you. I was hoping somebody, Big Henry or one of the twins, would walk down the street, emerge whole out of the green, so we'd have somebody else to talk to. Given ignored Pop, late that winter in February, he decided to go hunting with the white boys up in the kill. He saved up his money and bought a fancy hunting bow and arrow. He had bet Michael's cousin that he could kill a buck with the bow before the boy could take one down with the rifle. Michael's cousin was a short boy with a wandering eye who wore cowboy boots and beard t-shirts like it was a uniform. He was the kind of boy who dated and hung out with high schoolers, even though he was in his early 30s. Given practice with Pop, shot for hours in the backyard when he should have been doing homework. Started walking straight as Pop since he spent so long drawed up tight, every line on him as taut as the bow, until he could sink an arrow into the middle of a canvas tied between 2 pine trees 50 yards away. He won that bet one cold, overcast winter sunrise, in part because he was so good, in part because everybody else, all the boys he played football with, tussled in the locker room with, sweated almost to breaking on the stadium field with, woke up drinking beer like orange juice that morning because they figured Given would lose. I didn't know Michael yet. I'd seen him around school a few times, his blonde hair thick and curly, always looking like it was on the verge of matting because it wasn't never brushed. He had ashy elbows and hands and legs. Michael didn't go hunting that morning because he didn't want to get up that early, but he heard about it once his uncle came to Big Joseph in the middle of the day, the cousin sobering up, a look on his face like he smelled something bad, something like a rat dead on poison driven inside the walls by the winter cold, and the uncle saying, "He shot the nigger. This fucking hothead shot the nigger for beating him." And then, because Big Joseph had been sheriff for years, what we gonna do? Michael's mama told them to call the police. Big Joseph ignored her, and all of them went back up into the woods an hour in and found Given lying long and still in the pine needles, his blood a black puddle beneath him. Beer cans all around him from the boys throwing them and running once the cousin with the bad eye aimed and fired, once the shot rang out. How they scattered like roaches in the light. The uncle had slapped his son across the face once and twice. "You a fucking idiot," he said. "This ain't the old days." And then his cousin had put his arms up and mumbled he was supposed to lose, Pa. 100 yards off, the buck lay on his side, one arrow in his neck, another in his stomach, all of them cold and hard as my brother, their blood congealing. "Hunting accident," Big Joseph told them once they got back to the house and sat around the table, phone in hand before the cousin's daddy, short as his son, but with synced eyes, called the police. "Hunting accident," the uncle said, speaking on the phone with the light of the cold noon sun slicing through the curtains. "Hunting accident," the lazy-eyed cousin said in court, his good eye fixed on Big Joseph, who sat behind the boy's lawyer, his face still and hard as a dinner plate, but his bad eye roving to Pop and me and Mama, all in a row behind the DA, a DA who agreed to a plea deal that sentenced the cousin to 3 years in parchment and 2 years probation. I wonder if Mama heard some humming from the cousin's bad eye, some feelings of remorse in its wandering, but she looked through him, tears leaking down her face the whole time. A year after Given died, Mama planted a tree for him. "One every anniversary," she said, pain cracking her voice. "If I live long enough, gonna be a forest here," she said, whispering forest, talking about the wind and pollen and beetle rot. She stopped and put the tree in the earth and started beating the soil around the roots. I heard her through her fists. The woman that taught Marie Therese, she could see. Old woman looked damn near white. Tant Vanjie. She could see the dead. Marie Therese ain't never had that talent. Me neither. She dug her red fist into the dirt. I dream about it. Dream I can see Given again, walking through the door in his boots. But then I wake up, and I don't. She started to cry then. And I know it's there, right on the other side of that veil. She knelt like that until her tears stopped running, and she sat up and wiped her face and smeared blood and dirt all over it. 3 years ago, I did a line and saw Given for the first time. Wasn't my first line, but Michael had just gone to jail. I'd started doing it often. Every other day, I was bending over a table, sipping powder into lines, inhaling. I knew I shouldn't have. I was pregnant. But I couldn't help wanting to feel the coke go up my nose, shoot straight to my brain, and burn up all the sorrow and despair I felt at Michael being gone. The first time Given showed up, I was at a party in the Kill, and my brother walked through there with no bullet holes in his chest or in his neck, whole and long limbed like always, but not smirking. He was shirtless and red about the neck and face like he'd been running, but his chest was still as stone, still as he must have been after Michael's cousin shot him. I thought about Mama's little forest, the 10 trees she'd planted in an ever-widening spiral on every death day. I ground my gums sore staring at Given. I ate him with my eyes. He tried to talk to me, but I couldn't hear him, and he just got more and more frustrated. He sat on the table in front of me, right in the mirror with the coke on it. I couldn't put my face in it again without putting it in his lap, so we sat there staring at each other, me trying not to react so I wouldn't look crazy to my friends who were singing along to country music, kissing sloppily in corners like teenagers, walking in zigzags with their arms linked out into the dark. Given looked at me like he did when we were little, and I broke the new fishing pole Pop got him. Murderous. When I came down, I almost ran out to my car. I was shaking so hard I could hardly put my key in the ignition. Given climbed in next to me, sat in the passenger seat, and turned and looked at me with a face of stone. I quit, I said. I swear I won't do it no more. He rode with me to the house, and I left him sitting in the passenger seat as the sun softened and lit the edges of the sky rising. I crept into Mama's bedroom and watched her sleep, dusted her shrine, her rosary draped over her Virgin Mary statue in the corner, nestled among blue-gray candles, river rocks, 3 dried cattails, a single yam. When I saw Given Not Given for the first time, I didn't tell my mama nothing.
Woo! You need to drink some more juice for that. That's you gotta extinguish that fire. That was real. That's some fine writing right there. You might not have arrived to that the first time, but like that's brilliance to me. Like that's to me, I've my definition of brilliance is anything that illuminates something that wasn't seen before. Yeah. And I feel like a brilliant writer or a brilliant person is somebody who does that. And I would say that did that. So, damn, yeah, that unzipped me. Hearing you read it unzipped me more. Even like to hear the repetition of the honey accident, the honey. I didn't read it the way you read it. Yeah. But now that you read it that way, I can never unread it that way again, which is why this show is lit. Yeah. Where you gonna be? People who want to, find this book is dropped today. Mm-hmm. But where are you gonna be? What are some events you got coming up? I know tonight you got the event at Greenlight with Ayanna Mathis at 7:30. Mm-hmm. What else you got?
Tomorrow I have an event at the Schomburg.
So that would be Thursday.
Yes.
Thursday at the Schomburg with Lisa Lucas.
Oh, Wednesday. Oh, yes, Wednesday.
Today's Tuesday.
Yes.
Oh, so it's tomorrow.
Yes.
So tonight, if y'all watching at Lisa Lucas, we gonna figure it out. But it's tomorrow, today when it drops. The day it drops is tonight at the Schomburg. Talking to Lisa Lucas. What else you got going on?
I do not really know. I'm gonna be Nashville, Chicago, Dallas, San Francisco. And then
talk about the voices you be hearing like this.
and then Oxford, Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi. I'll be in New Orleans.
Okay.
I think that all of this should be available on my website, which you can find if you go to Scrivener webpage.
Yeah.
And click on.
And where people follow you? Can people follow you?
Yes, people can follow me.
But you gotta prove them. They gotta get in the winner's circle.
So people can follow me. I'm not as I have a Facebook account. I never go on there anymore. I couldn't.
Shit got too real.
Yeah, it got and
you don't gotta say that word.
Okay. And so but I am on Twitter.
Okay.
Jesmyn Ward. I'm not verified. They sent me
an email to be
verified.
Them blue checks.
I have not done.
You gotta get that blue check up. You gotta get your blue check up.
But see, I can't find the message that they sent me to get verified anymore. So now I've been sort of.
You still real though.
I've been trying.
Even without the blue check, you still real.
Thank you.
That's the writing proves that you real.
Hopefully, I'll figure it out. But yeah, Jesmyn Ward, and then I think my handle is Jesmyn.
Okay.
So they can follow me there.
Let me ask you, what was one thing you learned about this book that you were surprised by?
About
what did this book teach you about yourself?
Oh man. So this book taught me a lot about myself because I had never basically I'd never written anything where I needed to do like serious research, to write, right? I'd never written anything where I had to do research and then incorporate that research into the book so that it seemed organic to the story,
Yeah.
And so this book actually taught me that I could do that.
Okay.
And it also taught me that I can build a world and build a logic, I guess, that informs and that structures that world.
Okay.
Because I had to write, because certain chapters are written from first person perspective. Richie's first person perspective.
Right.
He's a ghost, right?
Right.
And so because he's experiencing the afterlife, like I had to create an afterlife for him, right? Yeah. Which had its own rules, which was which bent time in certain ways, which had like I guess different landscapes and where he could see heaven but not touch it, not go there. And I've never written anything like that before. Okay. That I'd never written anything where I had to like invent a world, where I had to build a world, and I think I was scared to do it first because I hadn't done it, but I did it and I really I enjoyed it. Well, so it taught me that I could do that.
Well, for doing that, this is yours.
Oh,
this is for you.
Okay.
You can open it.
Okay.
You looking at it like it's a bomb or something but that's.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that's the lit pen.
Yes.
Because you lit.
I love it.
So you might not get the blue check on Twitter.
There you go.
But you got the lit pen from us. That's your blue check over here.
Thank you.
That means you legit. So, your literary swag, before you get it, has it stayed the same? I remember your literary swag when we did it, when you had the baby.
Yes.
Was one thing.
Yes.
You talked about free people. Mm-hmm. Has it changed? Has your literary swag changed?
It's pretty much the same. I'm still free people, anthropology, and Mara Hoffman. Wanna know why?
Why?
I can explain some
okay.
swag. Okay, so I've written about my dad before. I don't know if you've read what I've written about my dad, but my dad dresses in costumes. So when I say costumes, I mean he has like 4 different identities, and he dresses according, I guess, to what he feels most like that day. Okay. So sometimes, he strongly identifies with his Native American ancestry, so he dresses, a lot of fringe, leather, right? Okay. He fringes his own shirts sometimes, right? Yes.
That's super swaggy.
Sometimes as a cowboy, right? So cowboy hat, boots, right?
Full thing, trusty boots.
Yes. Sometimes as a ninja because my dad has earned his black belt in Kung Fu 3 different times.
All right.
Yes.
Jim Kelly out here.
Yes.
Let's get money. All right.
Yes.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a ninja, right?
Wait, hold on, time out. So, is he dressed in gi, or is it like to what extent?
Like he is dressed in gi, and sometimes
like buying an avocado, like dressed in gi, like how much is these? He's just in the
like Bruce Leroy in The Last Dragon. How he's walking around in his fits. Sometimes my dad walks around.
He will just pull up to the function dressed like Bruce Leroy. We need to get your father on this show.
And then, we do. And then his last one is let's see, Black Panther. My dad, after Hurricane Camille, my dad's family was basically like evacuated so after 1969, they were given the choice to relocate.
Okay.
Right? And one of the places that they offered them the opportunity to relocate to was Oakland. And so that's where they went. And so my dad remembers being fed, by the Black Panthers, like breakfast.
You grew up on free lunch?
Yeah.
What's your favorite free lunch meal?
It was the pizza.
Which one? Was it the circle one or the rectangle? The rectangle one?
Yeah, the rectangular one.
Mine was the fish and cheese.
Really?
The fish and cheese was the super clutch. Because I had never seen fish and cheese managed on one plate before. I was like, I didn't even know you could do that. And it was in the patty. It was definitely lit.
Yeah.
Your pops has got to get on this show.
So because I feel like he has now inspired me to dress in costumes, at least like subconscious. So I'm either a witch, you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Or
keep going.
In my head, like I look outfits, I'm like, that looks witchy. I like that. I'm gonna have to rock that.
I'm covened up right now. Okay.
What else? Let's see. A witch. See, now you're making me blank. A witch. Sometimes I'm not a ninja, right?
Okay.
I'm not a ninja, but sometimes perhaps I'm a person who does martial arts, maybe an explorer, so maybe a little Lara Croft-ish.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That is also one of my costumes.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm a little hippie-ish, but I feel like hippies, that's very close to witchy.
Okay.
Sometimes I'm
hippie and witchy.
Yeah, I'm a little.
What would you call today? Where are you today?
Today, I feel like I'm a cross. No, I'm definitely witchy today.
Witchy.
Yes.
Okay, casting spells.
Black. Yes.
All right, and then your 3 writers.
Oh, okay. So right now, my 3 writers, these might resemble. I bet if you ask me this question before, this might be the same answer. If it is, I apologize.
It changes.
Yeah,
that's what's beautiful about it.
But I'm still thinking about my I recently wrote about this because I was asked like the 3 writers I would love to have a dinner party with. So they're in my brain. So definitely Faulkner because he, he's Faulkner. Right?
Okay.
I love his language. In the unconventional way, I feel like that he constructs novels. Right?
Yeah.
Definitely James Baldwin because he speaks the truth, and I feel like sometimes when I'm reading. Or when I'm doing a reading in my head, the way that I get myself worked up to read is I think, burn this motherfucker down. That's what I think over
it's that fire this time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so, and I feel like that's what he does every time. Like he puts pen to paper, he's always burning something down.
Okay.
And then Octavia Butler. Remember we were talking earlier about fantasy, sci-fi, and one of the reasons I love her work so much is because she did it, right? I mean, she wrote Black people into the future, into fantasy, and she's amazing. Her work is amazing.
That's the word. Wrote Black people in the future. Yeah. So, if y'all want to see more Black people in the future, make sure y'all buy this book, because we're gonna be there with or without. Damn it, I'm too close to the mic. I gotta get told all the time that I do that. But this has been another episode of Lit. Jesmyn, thank you for coming. Follow us at Lit Platform. Follow the production team, Pink Pig Productions. Shout out to Scribner for making sure that Jesmyn pulled up so swaggy in her witchy ninja / hippie Coven-esque swag. We got to get your pops up here.
Yes.
This has been another episode of Lit, the premier platform for all things literary. This is your boy Liddy Fontaine. Pretty Lit is what they call me. We out.